We're a couple of generations into smartphones with high-end cameras in them, and the HTC One M8 is the latest vying for your attention. Because I'm an Aussie, I'm going to call it the Mate from here on in, so I hope that's okay with you. Talking about the externals of the Mate first up, because that's a huge part of the photographic experience. The Mate is beautiful to look at and to hold. It's got a super smooth and sleek brushed exterior. However, because I'm a massive klutz, I find myself constantly dropping this, having it slip out of my hands just because it's so smooth and sleek. The other issue with the physical configuration when you're using it as a camera in landscape orientation is that your finger is going to start covering the back of this lens, the secondary lens, which is the dual lens system used for refocusing shots with depth information. I'll get into that a little bit later on. But if you can live with the external configuration of the Mate and you're not as clumsy as I am, then it is a really nice camera or smartphone camera to use. Let's look at some of the internals now. When you want to go and start up the camera app, you've got a couple of ways to do it. You can obviously unlock your phone and just start the app normally, or if you're on the lock screen, you can just swipe up on the camera icon and it launches automatically into the camera app. From here, the default is automatic mode, but there are a whole bunch of other options that you can use. All you need to do is head into the settings option, and there's a little icon that says auto. You've got night, HDR, panorama, and heaps more. There's also a full manual mode, which is really useful if you want to adjust things like your ISO, your exposure compensation, and of course your shutter speed. Unfortunately, you don't get control over the aperture as it's generally fixed. Apart from manual mode though, there are a couple of cool options on the Mate that I think that you'll find pretty interesting. So if we head out again into this menu system, we'll go back into another mode. We'll just click the next buttons here that actually gives you the entire menu system options of the camera. So we've got camera, video mode, Zoe camera, which is pretty much the same as it was on the previous HTC One, the front-facing selfie camera, duo capture, and pan 360. I'm going to show you a bit about the 360 mode because it's quite cool. So we head into it, and essentially what the camera is going to do is it's going to prompt you to collect images from basically a 360-degree pan around you. And you do that by taking photos and matching up the rectangle with the square rectangle on the screen. So we start taking images, like so, and move the camera around, just grabbing images all the way around you. And so what it does is when you're finished, once you've matched up all those rectangles, it puts them together into a nice 360-degree panorama, which you can view in a flattened 2D form, or you can view on the phone and actually pan all the way around the image. Apart from 360, as I mentioned, the selfie front-facing camera is actually slightly higher resolution at 5 megapixels than the rear camera. But when it comes to selfies, that's all you're really going to be wanting to do with this camera because it's actually capturing slightly less detail in terms of the image processing that it does. So detail is a little bit more smudged than the rear-facing camera. Now, I did mention a little bit before about this dual camera system. There are two lenses on the back of the Mate. The first one, which is the main lens, this is the one that captures the image. The one behind it, or closest to the edge, is the depth sensing lens. Now this grabs a whole bunch of depth information about the image and uses it so you can refocus images after you've taken them, a little bit like a litro camera. The M8 does a really good job of the U-focus and it does simulate the effect really nicely. And there are a whole bunch of other options too. You can do snowflakes on your images if you want. You can put autumn leaves falling. The options that you have in terms of editing are quite robust. Unfortunately though, the image quality itself is not quite there compared to a lot of its other competitors. So because the resolution is not particularly high, it doesn't make so much difference if all you're doing is sharing for web or using lower resolution versions just to put out on Facebook and things like that. But if you want to do something with images like print them or crop into them, you have less detail to work with. In terms of the rest of the image quality metrics, the Mate doesn't perform all that well in low light. There are quite a few lens flare issues. The exposures are generally accurate, but highlights really do tend to blow out quite a lot. HDR does mitigate this a little bit and it produces more even shots, but having to manually put on HDR every time that you want to take a shot so you don't lose that detail is kind of annoying. So when it comes to ultra pixels, the technology inside this phone is pretty much the same as the previous M7, which is a shame because HTC could have done a whole lot more to make images the best in class. but colors are reasonably punchy and detail is okay unless you want to crop in, of course, and get some high-res images. If you want to check out the full text review of my impressions and review on the HTC One M8's camera, head along to CNET right now.